personal use. You just think it can't get any hotter in the state of Florida. And you're probably right. I hope you're right. Let's just say that. But heat illness, summer safety, all these things, including emergency preparedness tips. We got some planning steps all on the docket with my next guest from Optum. Dr. Stevens, good to have you with us. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
How about some of the warning signs of heat-related illnesses, and then maybe what we should do if we see these warning signs?
The biggest signs that I usually recommend are looking for temperatures that won't come down. So body temperatures, 103 degrees, just not coming down on its own. Anybody who's confused, who's been out in the sun or in the heat, obviously if someone passes out, any nausea or vomiting after heat exposure. And then a lot of people don't realize that if you get too hot, your sweating mechanism actually can fail. So if someone actually has stopped sweating, that can be a huge problem. I think a lot of people, when they see someone who's overheated, their initial plan is get them something to drink, get them something to drink. So this is the person who you do not want to give anything to drink because they may actually pass out and vomit and choke on their own vomit. So we want them to get cool, but then we want to get them somewhere where they can get help. So get that person to a hospital right away. But you can cool someone, put them in an ice bath, cool compresses, remove hot clothing. Heat exhaustion would be the next level, where it may even happen several days after the high temperature exposure. And we see this a lot with people who are a little bit older, where they just can't seem to get regulated afterwards. So it's going to be more of that heavy sweating, maybe even nausea or vomiting. Shouldn't last more than an hour, but if it does, then that person also needs some help. And once again, it's the cool place, get the hot clothes off, get help if you need to. Some less concerning versions would be more of your heat cramps, heat rash. Heat cramping is that muscle spasms, usually because electrolytes have gotten out of balance. And, you're looking at your electrolyte solutions, coconut water, just replacing those minerals and salts that have been lost. But no, we don't recommend that people take salt tablets in those situations because that can really affect blood levels. Heat rash would be the last one. We usually see that in kids. It's kind of a, if anyone's heard of like prickly heat, and it's just a really fine red rash that can occur particularly over the torso and the trunk, armpits, places that like to sweat.
Right. And what would you do for that, to treat that?
So just once again, cool, dry place. You can put some powder if someone wants to use a little bit of baby powder, or even just cornstarch to help kind of keep things dry.
Isn't that neat? The doctor took it down to cornstarch, something my great-grandma used to say. That and witch hazel. Always keep that in the cupboard.
You got it.
Yep. We're talking with Dr. Amber Stevens. She's a family doctor with Optum. And summer safety. Let's move on to summer safety. Medications. I know this in particular. Some of my medications don't play well with mother-son.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden I'll notice that my skin is getting irritated, itchy, red, uncomfortable. What other symptoms too?
So the classics are going to be we got two terms. You got a photoallergy versus phototoxicity. But photoallergies are like a true allergic reaction. People will get sometimes even hives and welts, and that may happen several days after, but more people will experience that phototoxicity where just they get kind of almost looks like a sunburn, or it can just be like a real fine red rash, and it's usually a few hours right after sun exposure. And it is the medications directly that cause it.
Yeah, now you should just read your label, because the first thing I did was say, well, what am I taking that's new? Look at it, and there it says, stay away from prolonged exposure to sunlight there. But again,
absolutely.
We live, we learn.
Pharmacy, make sure.
Yeah. So water safety tips. Give me the top 3 for this summer, will you?
So really your top 3 water safety tips, number 1, far and wide, is know how to swim. Okay, that is the number one thing you can do to protect yourself, protect those around you, teach your children how to swim. Learning how to swim is the number one thing. And then when you're in a situation where you could get thrown off a board, where you could lose consciousness if you get injured, you need to wear life jackets. So items like boating, paddle boarding, jet skiing, those, you've got to have a life jacket on. And truly, I always tell people pool toys are not life jackets.
No.
Okay. Floaties are not life jackets. You want something that says that it is Coast Guard approved as a life jacket sort of device. So that does make a difference.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, and mostly anything that's meant to actually protect you in the water is going to be a canvas, a much heavier material than just some sort of a thin plastic. But I could be wrong.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, good.
Absolutely.
All right. I'm born and raised on an island. Still can't swim really well, which would explain my knowledge of life jackets. Nature's out there. How do I protect myself? Skaters, spiders, snakes. Oh, my.
Oh my is right. And it is Florida. We have lots of oh my's. So definitely knowing where you're going to be traveling. So if you're going somewhere where there are those lovely items and insects and whatnot, we want to make sure that you are protecting yourself appropriately, vaccinating if it's what should be done, yellow fever, those kinds of things. If you're going somewhere where malaria may be an issue, talking to your doctor about malaria prevention. And then just when you're there, making sure you're using a insect repellent. Recommend you can spray it on your skin, but if you're going somewhere where you really might get bit by mosquitoes or some other insect, wearing long pants, socks, shoes that go up over your ankle that really provide that extra protection, and then spraying the insect repellent directly on your clothing, you can actually get a higher concentration for better effect. Plus, closed-toed shoes, you're less likely to get bit or injured. And when you start talking about snakes and spiders and scorpions, they really like to hide near or underneath rocks. So you don't want to be running around with bare feet, and you want to make sure that you're being cautious about where you're at and where you're stepping. And then definitely, we have a lot of ticks around, particularly in the South, not even so much in Florida, but definitely anywhere there's a lot of green, we've got ticks, and they're all throughout the United States.
Sure.
And really just doing a good check before you go anywhere. Make sure you, head to toe, make sure you don't have any of those critters trying to hide and get a free meal.
We are talking with Dr. Amber Stevens from Optum. And, we do a lot of hurricane preparedness, and the Florida News and Entertainment Network is kind of what we do. We want to make sure that people are aware of what they should do in an emergency. But when we think outside of natural disasters, what other potential emergency situations should we worry about?
So, truthfully, I think the last 2 years has brought to light a lot of that to the general population. I mean, everyone thinks about natural disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes and floods, but I believe we've all really seen what can happen when supply chains get affected, secondary to, like the pandemic that's happened the last 2 years with places getting shut down, medications not being accessible, production being slowed, food being limited in places. I mean, for the love of all that's holy, there was a toilet paper shortage. So being prepared is more than just a natural disaster. It's having a good supply kit for about 3 days for everybody in your home, and that includes medications, food, water, first aid, even battery backups for medical products. Those are very important things to consider, that it's not necessarily just going to be, hey, a hurricane came through and knocked out the power for a few days. Right. It could be we couldn't get your prescriptions because there's a backup, and so now you have a 3-day supply at home that's going to hold you over until that they can get it in.
So, and you would take these considerations too, folks, if you've got young children in the house or perhaps you're responsible for an older adult. The medication alone is going to be life-saving. You know that. So where do we go for more information, Dr. Stevens?
So in regards to traveling and travel preparedness, I always recommend patients go to the CDC. They've got the most updated information, particularly when you talk about specific locations. Coast Guard has great information on preventing drowning, as does the CDC. And the CDC actually has lots of really wonderful information on heat-related illnesses as well.
Perfect. We've been talking with Dr. Amber Stevens from Optum. And I'm learning so much. A lot of it I knew, but there's always more to learn or to remember or remind yourself with. Thanks again for sharing your expertise with us about not only heat illness, summer safety, and emergency preparedness, Dr. Stevens.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
You got it. You're listening to the Florida Talk and Entertainment Network. This is the Florida Roundtable.